Hello everyone, welcome to our Q&A night for prospective applicants to the Law Clinic. Just checking if everyone can hear me, let us know. My name is Ryan and I'm the Student Director of the Law Clinic this year. And with me today we also have Samantha, the Vice Director, Hannah, who's also the Vice Director, Ayushi, who is our Senior Outreach Manager, James, our Training and Recruitment Manager, and Shanika, our Media and Publicity Manager. So just to give you a brief overview of how this evening will go and what we'll be talking about, we will be going over our work, the different opportunities that are available within the Law Clinic outside of regular casework, the application process, how we are adapting to the restrictions imposed as a result of COVID-19, and a few of us will share some personal experiences of our time in the clinic. We will then go through some frequently asked questions and finally open up to a live Q&A function at the end of the event.
Hi, I'm Samantha, one of the Vice Directors, and I'll just give you a really brief overview of the clinic, what we do and what we're about. So the University of Bristol Law Clinic has been established for about 6 years now, and we're really proud to have been able to increase the quality, size, and reach of our services over the years. Over the past 3 years, we have grown by over 25% of students, and we're able to take on more than 200 cases in the past academic year. With declining legal aid available, the clinic's work in providing pro bono legal advice becomes even more important for the local community. But on the flip side, clinic work is also really important in enhancing a student's experience at university by presenting us with the opportunity to engage in hands-on client-facing work. Such practical law experience can be really meaningful in honing skills like effective communication and client management, which can all be applied in future work environments. So how it works is that every student admitted to the clinic will get involved in casework. You'll be paired up and work on cases and be supervised by one of our academic directors for each case. The types of cases are extremely varied and can involve housing, family, employment, and contract, to name a few. There are also opportunities for students beyond casework, and I'll hand it over to Hannah to elaborate on these further.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm the other Vice Director this year. I'm just going to introduce our extra opportunities that become available to you when you get onto the Law Clinic. So I'll start off with community law and then IU will speak a bit about outreach. So I ran the community law projects last year, and this year Jack and Ataniki will be taking over. So you'll meet them if you decide to apply. Basically, street law is a worldwide movement. It's kind of known as community law here at Bristol. And the focus of all the projects that run under the community law bracket is public legal education. And it's just about the idea that you are making the law more accessible to those who kind of might need it. So we go out to different organisations and talk about a specific area of the law that might become relevant to them. The main kind of projects we run involve going out to schools. So last year we had students who were members of community law go out and run workshops with sixth form students, and it was just about trying to make the law more accessible, more interactive. The school would choose a topic that it thinks the students might benefit from. So last year we had access to law, so students that were thinking about doing a law degree. We had human rights, and we had a group do a knife crime presentation. And it's just about making the rights people have at law more understandable and using your law degree to kind of make the law more accessible to audiences. And it's just kind of helping you develop those skills that will go on to help you as you progress through your law degree, and about kind of being able to communicate the law in the most effective way possible, and in the right way to the audience you're speaking to. So last year we also did a written project where students on a community law team created a questionnaire for a local charity who dealt with survivors of domestic abuse, and it allowed people to investigate an area of the law that is outside of their kind of main degree and kind of develop a new set of knowledge and skills. This year, because obviously of COVID, we'll probably move the focus more to those written projects, because it will allow us to continue kind of work as normal and run as many projects as possible for members. And in terms of schools, instead of giving presentations, we'll be able to send those materials, those PowerPoints, those activities over to teachers, and they can deliver it. And this year, Jeff and Ethnique are really kind of willing to hear ideas from potential team members and their kind of plans on how we can kind of get creative and still run the projects during this time. So I will now pass over, I've also got to talk about lip service. It's separate to community law, and applications will go out separately, and it's basically a scheme which is a collaboration of all the Bristol unis, and it gives members the opportunity to kind of deliver presentations to litigants in person, so people that are going to have to present themselves in court, and demystify the court process. So you work off of the script which is given to you by lip service, and you you have a bit of information about that person's case, and then you kind of run through the procedure and just make it all accessible and give them the best opportunity of getting their point across on the day. So now I will pass over to Ivy to talk about outreach.
Hi, so as Hannah said, I'm Ayu, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our outreach projects and how outreach will be running this year. So we have a bunch of outreach projects, and I will get to talking about them individually in a bit, but I'm just going to generally speak about how outreach runs. So last year we did drop-in sessions where we would go to one of the charities we were partnered with, and we would essentially sit in a room for a couple of hours, and people would come to us with legal questions. We could either open a case for them if it was something that looked like it was going to be a case, or if it was something that didn't look like it needed to be a case, we could just go off, research it, obviously check everything with a supervisor, and then get back to whoever it was who approached us. So that's the sort of general idea of a drop-in. And the point of outreach is, as Samantha mentioned earlier, the LASPO, which is the Legal Aid, Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act, severely cut legal aid budgets for people. So people who didn't have that much access to legal aid anyway are now even more out of the loop. So as a law clinic, it was very important to us to essentially reach out to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford legal aid, or even necessarily know that they can have legal aid. So this is part of the reason we did drop-ins, which was where we would go to the beneficiaries of the charities, would actually leave the sort of Clifton area. And so outreach cases, if you do open up a case from a drop-in, count as part of your mandatory number of cases per year, which is, I think, 2 cases per year. Yes, it's 2 cases per year. And the cases often relate to the charities that you are part of. So for example, with Bristol Drugs Project or Bristol Mind, they will often be related to something to do with a drugs charge, or like mental health issues, or 125, which is street sex work, but not always. It's just a really good opportunity to sort of like get out of Clifton, see more of Bristol, and really engage with people who you wouldn't necessarily otherwise meet in a very sort of privileged university setting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the individual cases now. We have Click Sargent and Peony, who are managed by Zoe Karma. And those, so Click Sargent is obviously Young Lives with Cancer, and they have essentially just little houses in Bristol that people and the people who have cancer in their families can come to for the duration of their treatment. And they sort of help with every aspect of that. That's like benefits or housing or literally anything that comes as a sort of side effect of having a child with cancer. And 125, which is Peony, is a sort of moving on service for it. It's Peony is part of 125, and 125 deals with women who are either forced into street sex work or who are into street sex work and essentially want to get out. And Peony is part of the moving on service, so women who've had drug problems or sort of other similar issues will often come to 125 and Peony to help to get help with those, and that is once again benefits or housing or it's occasionally police charges or like just sort of getting your life back together really. And then our other three projects, which are run by Esme, are the Bristol Drugs Project, Bristol Mind, and Barton Hill. So as you can probably tell from the name, Bristol Drugs Project is dealing with people who are in recovery or using drugs and who are addicted to alcohol. That is, yeah, also the cases you tend to relate to those sorts of topics. Bristol Mind is people with sort of more severe mental health issues who struggle to, I think they struggle mostly with like housing and benefits, and that's the sort of cases we get around there. And then the Barton Hill settlement is a new project that we started up last year, which is super exciting, where we work alongside a bunch of charities, and it's a very sort of holistic approach to helping people, and that you can get any sort of case from the Barton Hill project, but at the crux of it is because we are all sort of specialized in different things. Like there's the law clinic, there's Bristol Mind, which is mental health issues, there's basically loads of charities doing amazing work individually. The point of Barton Hill is to get us all together and help a person in a very holistic and like community-based way. So that is started today, not today, sorry, that started last year, and we're hoping to continue that. So just a little bit about outreach and COVID. Obviously, we can't run the drop-ins in the same way that we used to run drop-ins, where we would go to the individual charities in groups of 2. But what we're trying to do this year, I think, is really just mold ourselves to what each individual charity needs. So outreach has always been about meeting the charities and their beneficiaries where they are. And this year is no different. So we are still recruiting for all of these different organizations, but it may not look like drop-ins this year, depending on what the charities need and what their like specific set of requirements are. So that will depend on whether or not you go to drop-ins. It sort of depends on the charity you apply to. I'd recommend just applying to something that excites you, that interests you. If you do want to get involved in outreach, it's an amazing opportunity to sort of go outside of just Clifton and outside of just the university and actually sort of get into the nitty-gritty of taking on cases and stuff. But obviously this year it's not necessarily going to run in the same way that it did last. And new partnerships and events. So we used to do, I'm not sure if we still will be able to do this, we might do it virtually, a fundraiser for one of our partner organizations. So the last one we did was Click Sargent, and we didn't actually manage to do one last year because of obviously COVID. So we might do something virtually, we might do something else, we'll see how that goes. And then we're looking at setting up 2 new partnerships, one with Pause, which is an organization that helps women who've had 2 or more children removed from their care, and one with SafeLink, which is transforming the lives of people who are victims of domestic and sexual abuse. So those are the new partnerships that we're working on this year, and we'll hopefully roll those out. But yeah, that's all of our outreach opportunities. It's definitely super exciting and super rewarding.
And I personally, without any bias, would recommend that you all get involved in it. I'm going to pass over to James now. I'm going to talk about applications.
Hi, so my name is James, and I'm the training and recruitment manager for this year. And so I will be talking about the process of the applications, what we're looking for, what training might look like this year, and the impact of COVID in terms of training. Now, first of all, talking about the process. Well, firstly, in order for you to get into the clinic, you would have to apply. And so the application for the clinic was sent out last week through the mass email. And so there should be a link to the form in which you submit your application. And so some dates you should be aware of for second, third years, and master students. Your deadline for the application will be on the 12th, so next Monday. And so if you are thinking of applying to the clinic or joining the clinic, it's highly recommended for you to have that completed by at least this weekend. And so for the first year students, your deadline's a little later. It's on the 19th of October. And so you still have a bit of time, but definitely visit the questions and start to brainstorm what you might want to write. Now, talking about the sort of process and as part of sort of transparency of the clinic, every single application we will be looking at or marking will be double marked. And not only so, every single application that comes to us, the applicant's name, student number, and their email will be crossed out. And so it will be marked anonymously. So there's no sort of room for any rigged marking. Now, the next thing is that we will not accept any sort of late submissions. And I think this is very reflective of the standards of the clinic as well, being that we have to be very precise with the sort of work we do and what we expect of each clinic member to be able to do when they are on a case. And so the same thing with being meticulous about every single section you fill in. For instance, in the application form, when they ask you for your email, your university email, just be sure to put in your university email and not your personal email. Now, what we're looking for is actually quite simple. We just want a clear, concise, structured response from the applicant. And so I think we should emphasize the fact that any sort of experience that you have picked up in your life will be relevant to your answer. So for example, if you were a sort of waiter or a waitress at a restaurant, the sort of being on time, going to your job prepared will be very relevant as well to your application and what we're looking for. And so generally just looking for a clear, concise, structured response from our applicants. Now moving on to training, traditionally or pre-COVID, we would have training with Osborne Clarke, as in the second, third years, as well as the master students would have their training with Osborne Clarke. And so being in the circumstances right now and COVID and the pandemic, it's unlikely that we will be working with Osborne Clarke for training this year. However, the prospects of this will definitely be still open for the years to come. Now, talking about COVID and its impact on training and just sort of your clinical work this year. Firstly, the law clinic itself, the building at Berkeley Square, is currently closed. And so every sort of case, training, any sort of case you take on, and any sort of training that you'll be doing will all be done remotely online. And so we're currently using at the clinic the software SharePoint for us to store our documents and our cases. And so when you are confirmed to place at the clinic, we will run you through the software afterwards. Now, in terms of doing clinical work, working on a case, you might have heard or might have seen on our website that we do sort of meetings with our clients. So pre-COVID, we would have sort of real life client meetings, but now given the clinic being closed as well as COVID, we are now moving on to Skype and Zoom. And so because of that, we have to emphasize the requirement or the standard for us to maintain a high standard of professionalism and confidentiality. And so, given the digital age where things could be shared amongst people really, really quickly, we want to maintain the standard of confidentiality, especially since we don't want any sort of sensitive information of our clients to be shared with anyone else but yourself and your partner. And yeah, I talked about the Osborne Clarke training. And so in regards to the standards of the clinic, as well as what we expect of each clinic member when you are confirmed to place, we have a handbook. And so right now we've updated the handbook to include standards for the situation with COVID right now. So yeah, so now I'm going to pass the time on to Ryan and Yushi to talk about their own personal experiences.
So I'm going to talk about my experience working on an outreach project last year, one which Ayushi mentioned. So I was part of the BDP team and also known as the Bristol Drugs Project. And this is a harm reduction center for people with substance abuse problems. And these people are often discriminated against in various aspects of life, including in employment and housing. And last year I did drop-ins once a month roughly. And I found that myself and the other students that took part there were really able to make significant impacts and improvements for advising the BDP clients. This work was really rewarding, I think, for me also on a personal level, and brings students into the city, as Ayushi has already mentioned, to help some of Bristol's most vulnerable people. Next, I'm going to hand over to Samantha, who is going to talk about one of her cases. Thank you.
So personally, I've done quite a few housing dispute cases, and in all of them, we acted for the tenants. Some of the tenants are working professionals of a slightly lower income, but we've also received cases from student tenants as well. Most of these disputes have to do with deposits and other breaches of the tenancy agreement. So for example, at the end of the tenancy, a landlord may decide to retain quite a large sum of the deposit. And if the tenant is not happy about that, they can bring a case to the law clinic and we can try to help them to resolve the dispute and get back the sums that they are looking for. So in one of my cases, my case partner and I, we had to go through the tenancy agreement to look for potential breaches. And these cases tend to apply principles of tort and contract. So I find it quite interesting because I think everyone has to learn tort and contract for a qualifying law degree. And it's interesting to see what we learn in the lectures being applied in real life client work. Thankfully, I never had to go to court and everything was sort of resolved through just correspondences with the landlord. Sometimes all you need is a slightly strongly worded letter that incorporates sort of legal aspects just to show the landlord that we do have a strong case against them, and they usually tend to be a little bit more lenient to the tenant afterwards. So yep, those are some of the common issues you might get when you join a clinic, because there are quite a number of housing dispute cases going around. And that's all from me, so I'll pass it to Ayushi to share her experiences.
Hi, I'm back. So other than what Ryan said about outreach cases being really, really rewarding and making you feel like you're having a really important and significant impact on people's lives, I also had a particularly interesting case where my case partner and I were the first law clinic students to actually represent a client in court. It was a small claims court, so nothing massive, but generally speaking, law clinic students can't represent clients in court unless it's within the small claims court. So we managed to go in and represent our client as a lay representative, and we actually won the case, which was really cool. And it was a massive landmark for the law clinic to have students actually do the representation and win the case as well. So yeah, that is my interesting case experience. And now we're going to do some FAQs.
So myself, Ryan back again, and James are going to go through some of the frequently asked questions before we open up to the live Q&A session at the end. So this question we often receive from students who are concerned whether or not they'll be able to balance the commitment of the law clinic alongside their studies. Typically, we expect students to do between 2 and 3 cases per year. And the workload will vary really at different times of the year. It's difficult to be precise about time commitments, as sometimes you may have several weeks where you are without a case or waiting for a reply from a client or an opponent. And some cases have more work involved than others. For example, proofreading a business contract for a client is not quite as time intensive as representing a client at an employment tribunal. Now I'll hand over to James to answer the next question.
Yeah, so in talking about how much commitment is expected of the clinic member, again, I think sorry. Will it be too hard as a first year to handle the cases? And so in our current sort of clinic training program, we make sure that every single first year student is equipped with the necessary tools to go into a case with confidence. And so as a first year, we don't think it's too hard for you to handle a case. Of course, how hard a case is really depends on the nuances of the case. For instance, you might get a case that is really, really big with a lot of complicated facts, a lot of parties involved. And so in that regard, you could say that it would be harder. But then with any sort of basic fundamental skills when going into a case, for instance, where SharePoint is, where are the documents you might need for your clients to sign, these are all going to be transferred over to you, so then you are ready to take on a case either in your first year or in your second year. Yes.
So another question we often get from first years is or from any applicants to the law clinic, is what kind of impact a membership is likely to have on their studies. Thankfully, we don't have any reports of law clinic negatively impacting any students' studies. In fact, many of our members find that the practical application of the law in the clinic setting is beneficial for their studies. It can be particularly helpful when approaching problem questions, for example. And as Samantha has already mentioned, you will also likely encounter many aspects of the law which you will study here at Bristol, including tort, contract, and land law while you're working at the clinic. You don't have to reapply for entry into the law clinic. Once you're admitted, you will have membership for the duration of your time at Bristol Law School. We just ask that you renew your membership every summer. In terms of how many spaces we have available, we have 32 spaces for first years, and we have around 40 spaces available for students from other year groups, that being second, third, and postgrads. The rest of the available spaces that open up this year at the Law Clinic are reserved for students taking the Clinical Legal Studies module, which is a third year course. This can be an alternative but not guaranteed route into membership for people who are in their first or second year listening to this who may not be successful in their application. But this isn't guaranteed as the course is often oversubscribed. So if your application should be unsuccessful in the first attempt and you're going to be here in second or third year, I would definitely recommend reapplying. And often people don't get in, or sometimes it happens that people don't get in on their first try, but they will get in on their second try or even their third try. So if you have any questions at the end of this session that aren't answered by the Q&A, you can email myself or James, and you can see our emails on the screen here. And you can also see those details in the email that we sent you inviting you to apply. I think we're now going to start the Q&A session before we finish up for the evening.
Oh, yes. So, hi, I'm James. I'm the training and recruitment manager. So if you have any questions, just put it into the chat and we will answer them. Yep.
Okay, so the first question we have is from Jessica, and she asked, with the word count saying approximately, how many words is too many? For example, 15 to 20.
I can fill that one if you want. I think we have given the word count as just an approximation to give you a little bit of flexibility, but 15 to 20 words of the limit would not affect your application negatively. But if you were to go way over the word limit, I guess that would be an indication to us that you're not particularly good at following instructions or guidelines, which obviously is an important quality and skill for membership of the clinic. So try to stay within the word limits, but they're not set in stone, so you have a little bit of flexibility.
The next question is from Jade, and she said, how many applications do you expect to receive from first-year students?
I have no answer to that. Usually we accept around 1 in 5 applicants. We don't know yet. We'll see whenever Monday's deadline rolls around. I know on Monday morning of this week we had 80 applications already, and obviously there's only 30 spaces, or around 30. So we expect to get far more applicants, unfortunately, than spaces we have available, and we're constrained obviously by the staff and resources that we have in the law clinic. Otherwise, we'd like to admit everyone who applied, but we do expect quite a lot of applications. But yeah, usually 1 in 5 roughly applicants gets accepted.
Yeah, I can add on a little bit. I think for last year, we received about 120 applications for first years, and we took in 32.
Yeah. So quite competitive. Yeah.
The next question is from Hazuki, and they asked, I'm an international student and my mother tongue is not English.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
Fine.
That's not a problem. Yeah, that's fine.
Then our next question is from Top, and they said, are the outreach programs separate to the law clinic work?
Okay, I can answer that. Outreach is part of the law clinic. Obviously, your outreach cases do count for, as Ryan said, you have 2 to 3 mandatory cases a year. Your outreach cases do count for that, but equally, outreach is sort of, it's separate in the sense that we go actually outside the clinic and we work with partner organizations. It's sort of like the clinic, but a little bit further out, essentially. We do the same work in terms of answering questions and taking on cases. We just do it in a way that we try to make it more accessible to people. So short answer, no, it's within the clinic, but long answer, you do go a little bit further out.
Our next question is from Amira, and they asked, what happens if a member fails to bring a claim? Do they get their membership revoked? And what happens to the claimant if the law clinic member fails to win the case?
So the thing with doing cases at the clinic is that most of the people who are coming to the clinic are, they sort of exhausted their resources, and they're coming in with a case that's not, most of the time it's not winnable, but you are not necessarily expected to win a case per se. Your membership will not be revoked if you don't win the case again. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also worth saying that we don't, a lot of our cases aren't necessarily like a claimant and a defendant or anything of the sort. There's not really prosecution defendant vibe. It's much more like small issues like applying for benefits or housing, and we do occasionally have cases that go to court as well, but it's not. It's definitely not the majority of our cases where you have like a prosecutor or a defendant or something intense like that.
And it's really just about getting the best outcome you can for the client in whatever case it may be. And as she said, it's not always as adversarial as a court case. And I would reassure people that every piece of advice you give at the law clinic is checked by qualified solicitors. So it's not like you're out on your own and you have some responsibility for winning a case. You have a solicitor really contributing and giving you ideas as to how to approach the case and how to make your arguments. So, it's not essential that you win all your cases.
Olivia asked, are members assigned cases based on their chosen modules?
No, they're not. Sometimes the administrative team at the clinic will ask for your preferences for a case, but generally they're allocated on a random basis, and the administrative team does the allocation. So even if you're a first year and you might not have studied like contract or tort fully, not first year, second year, you may not have studied employment, for example, but you may be allocated an employment case. So no, it really doesn't depend on what modules you take.
Well, then with employment specifically, we should say that they often do allocate employment cases to people who do employment, just because it's a very specialized area.
But it's not guaranteed. It really depends on the number of students who are capable of taking on like, the cases and how many of such cases are available and so on.
Well, I just add, when you're allocated a case and you first meet your client, you're not expected to give advice on the spot. It's more of a fact-finding exercise. You introduce yourselves, and then you can go away with your case partner and kind of research the area. So it's not essential that you're kind of completely knowledgeable beforehand, because you'll have lots of opportunity to kind of learn what you need to know.
Yeah, and so just adding on to that, I think it's what makes the clinic quite special as well for you to join, because you get to explore areas of law that you might not be studying per se, and you just get to know a lot more and really apply it to your case. Yeah.
The next question is from Eric, and he asked, with only 40 places reserved for non-first year students, would you mind indicating how many applications are usually submitted for non-first year students? Also, will applications be reviewed on a rolling basis or only after Monday's deadline?
No to the rolling basis question. We only review applications after the deadline has passed. As for number of expected applications, again, as Brian said, last year it was about 1 to 5. Last year, in fact, we didn't open applications to third year students, so we're expecting that this year there may be quite a number of additional applications just because we're opening it to third years. But I think the roughest figure we can give you is about 1 to 5.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Elise asked, do you only work on cases during the term time?
No, definitely not. I mean, I was working on a case over summer as well. And so it's the clinic is open basically the entire for the entire year. So whenever a case comes in, the administrative team at the clinic would sort of ask people or send out a mass email to see if anyone is available to take on a case. And so that could be during your summer break, or it could be on your holidays as well, or as you mentioned, during term. But yeah, so no, it will not just be during term time. It will definitely be around the year.
Although cases are only automatically allocated during term time.
Yeah.
And over holidays, people are asked if they're free to take on cases before they're allocated.
Right.
So it's not automatic, but if you are free and you do have the time, we would like it if you did take on a case.
Our next question is from Kai, and they asked, if you're studying an LLM but have not studied law at undergrad, are you still eligible?
Yes.
We've had a lot of questions about what we're looking for in applicants, so maybe we should review them.
I think we don't want to get too prescriptive about what we want to see in applications. We don't want to give you a laundry list of, I think one of the questions asked you to list 3 qualities, so I don't want to come up with 3 for anyone listening. But what I would advise people to do is to do the research into the law clinic, what we're about, the kind of work we do, and think really carefully about the kind of skills that would be most relevant for the work that we do. So When picking those 3 skills, when talking about their experiences, I would really encourage everyone to apply it to the work we do at the law clinic, and yeah, focus on that and demonstrating that you've done a bit of research. Even coming along and taking part in this tonight virtually is a good first step in getting your application accepted. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Ryan. I think it's very key for you to do your research as to what the clinic does. In specific, I think with our work with clients, and so you would want to pick your traits and sort of explain your traits in relation to the work we do. But yeah, definitely what Ryan said.
I think it's also important to say that the clinic really tries to make it as accessible and as inclusive as possible. So we understand that not everybody's had the chance to do, for example, like a legal internship or something of the sort, and that's not going to hinder your application. It is really just about the experiences you've had in your life and the applicable skills that you learn from them. We don't require a sort of wealth of legal experience to come into the clinic. It is just what you've learned and how you present yourself, and whether or not we feel like you'd be a good fit around clients.
We have a question from Amira. She asked, for international students who are not in Bristol, is it possible for them to take part in the outreach programs whilst living in their home country?
Yes. Short answer. Longer answer, you will probably be taking part in the referrals. So through our outreach projects, we have each individual charity refer different clients to us. We might pass some of those clients on to you. So it will be a virtual thing. I don't think if we run the drop-ins, obviously you will probably not be able to attend. And with the time difference, even if they're a virtual drop-in, we might struggle with that too. So you can take part in outreach. I think it will just be on a referral basis.
The next question is from Zach, and he asked, are there legal professionals such as lecturers or others who work with the clinic to provide oversight to the work being done?
Yeah, those are your academic directors. So we have our clinic director, John, who has had years of experience with pro bono legal service.
I think he's a part-time judge as well.
Yeah, he's a part-time judge at a Bristol court, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he judges one day a week. And we have other solicitors, qualified solicitors, and they're all based in practice. So they not only are academics, but they've also practiced as solicitors, which is obviously so important for the kind of work we do in the clinic. So yeah, we have, I think, 3 solicitors, including John, the clinic director, who work and supervise us.
And nothing is sent to clients without their approval.
Yeah.
We don't communicate at all with the clients without their approval.
Yeah.
Our next question is from Linhan, and they said, how many hours do we need to spend every week usually? Say usually a full day or possibly longer.
It really depends. If I get your question, it's on the cases, right? Yeah. So it really depends. I think Ryan mentioned too in the presentation just now that you might have clients who are really unresponsive, and they might get back to you in like 2 weeks. And so, in that case, you wouldn't have any work to do in the sense of going for like next steps. But if your client is more responsive, they have a lot for you to sort of go through, then I feel like it wouldn't be unreasonable for you to expect a full days of work or full 2 days of work in relation to your case. Yeah.
And with outreach, it's usually a commitment of 1 drop-in session a month. So that's about 2 hours a month. That's on top of 3 cases.
Our next question is from Zach, and he asked, are members of the clinic routinely evaluated? If so, how?
I think there's a lot of supervision, so I'm not sure about evaluation. We do ask clients after we close the case to give us feedback, and often that feedback will be shared with the members, and that's really helpful for us if there's any constructive criticism in there. But there's a lot of oversight as opposed to evaluation. So all of the emails between you and your client will be CC'd to the law clinic mailbox. So John, the clinic director, has access to all of that communication, as do the administrative assistant and the executive assistant. And as has been mentioned quite a few times, all of your letters and advice to clients will be checked. So you have an awful lot of oversight. But in terms of evaluation, we don't really evaluate internally. We just try and help students do the best work they can and get the best outcomes for their clients.
We have a handbook that we expect you to sort of
Yeah.
stay within the guidelines of, but those are guidelines that will be said to you, and you'll be able to refer to them whenever you need.
Next, we have a question from Top, and they ask, for the outreach projects, do they come hand in hand with the law clinic applications, or is it a different application altogether?
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
a box that you can tick on the application if you'd like to be considered for outreach as well, and then we also consider that application for outreach separately.
Our next question is from Olivia, and she asked, what does the training entail?
So I think it depends. So for second and third years, as well as master students, you will be doing a sort of lecture training video. So it would be a series of around 7 videos, if I remember correctly. And it's by our academic director, John Peake, and he will go over what they want you to do, or what they require you to do at the clinic. And for first year students, we're going to do a training that's simulation based. So we'll make a sort of hypothetical case and then hypothetical clients, and you will have to go through sort of the motions of the case throughout your first year. Yeah.
We've had a few questions about the actual questions on the application. Are we able to answer this?
Yes. Why don't you ask them and then we can see.
Okay. What's the main difference between the first 2 questions of the application? The first being listing our qualities that fit well with the law clinic, and the second asks you to connect those qualities to work with the law clinic. So do we still have to tie in how our qualities will be relevant to the clinic in the first question?
I don't think that's especially relevant in the first question. I think it's fine if you just list 3 bullet points of the 3 qualities that are most important to you, and then it's really in the second question that we would expect you to write a lot more about how that connects to the work that you're doing at the law clinic, hopefully. But in the first instance, I would just list the 3. That would be my advice.
I mean, if I recall the application form giving you the sort of choice of 150 words per trait, and so I think you could take that the word count as an opportunity for you to elaborate as to what these traits are, maybe your experience behind these traits, you know, without the sort of connection with the law clinic, and then in the second question, you can make that connection with the clinic and the work that we do. So basically, first question, you could list the traits, use the word count to your advantage for you to explain where these traits might have come from, or why these traits in specific, and then use the second box to do to explain how in specific it works in relation with the clinic, the work at the clinic.
Okay, our next question is from Alicia, and she asked, do members generally work on cases individually or as part of a team?
It's always in pairs and with one supervisor, and that's the same for outreach as well.
Okay, if that's all the questions, thank you all very much for coming this evening and taking part. If you have any outstanding questions, or if there's anything that occurs to you that we didn't mention this evening, you can email myself or James, and our emails are included in the email that was sent out to you with the application. But thank you for coming.
Yes, and just to end it off, this is Chinuka. Okay. And she is the, do you want to?
I'm the media and publicity manager for the law clinic this year.
Yeah, so thank you for doing all the hosting and everything.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.